Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Rue and this is Rue with the Books. In this video, I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. It's a pretty colossal fantasy series quartet nearing almost 3,000 pages, pretty epic in scale. So hopefully this video can help you decide whether it's worth picking up if you haven't read it, or give some room for thought if you have. Before I get into all that fun fantasy stuff, be sure to like this video and press the subscribe button. It would mean an absolute ton. This review is for the most part spoiler free. I just aim to discuss the basic plot, at least as established in the first book, characters, companions, and action without going too much into what happens past book one. Any spoilers I mention in book one are easily predictable either way due to the tropish nature of fantasy. So, yeah. You saw the transition, so you know what this section is about, but let me begin by setting the stage. In the past, there was a god war in which only two gods and their respective forces fought against each other in the banished lands, bringing about world-shaking consequences. Elion was the patron of all things good, and Azeroth of all things evil. The war ended in a tie, but Elion ended up turning his back on humanity. And so, it is his angels, or Ben Elam as they are called in this series, who become responsible to fight Azeroth again should he turn up again for round 2. This leads us to a prophecy made by an ancient giant. The prophecy states that around the time Azeroth's plans begin to start coming into fruition, a bright star representing Elion will come forth, as well as the black sun representing Azeroth. Everyone in the banished lands will have to pick a side before the final battle, and its outcome will affect everyone too. It's an epic fantasy saga in which good has to battle evil. The first book, Malice, is a coming-of-age story which sets the scene for the prophecy. It follows 3 main POVs, who are all young characters, and the events around them that shape them into the people they're going to become both physically and mentally. Aside from those 3, there are also a lot of other POVs. I'm not going to touch on that here though. We start to see both the factions of good and evil banding together, which throughout the series continue to grow through many different events until the concluding battle. This series, if one thing, is definitely not linear. There are so many twists and turns along the journey, where the progress is made or hindered, and where a lot of things that happen are just unpredictable because just so much happens. This series is definitely one of those where it gets better throughout. I want to say that I think the writing in the first book is pretty bad. I liked what John Gwynne was going for on like a macro scale, with setting things up and all, what the grand vision was, but it was an absolute shambles for me on the micro. It felt like he didn't have an editor, so all of the characters are constantly grunting or just repeating other verbs, or a character that you might like says they'd like another character, and that just happens all the time without expanding why. It felt basic and it simplified or dumbed down the characters a bit for me. Like they can't handle slightly more complex emotion. It felt like he put those things in and said, "Oh, I'll come up with better words or phrases later," and then just completely forgot. These issues do become a bit better over time, but they don't disappear completely. I thought book 1 was alright, and 2 was a bit better, but then books 3 and 4 had me hooked. It's kind of bound to happen when you invest so much time into a series, unless it's a massive, massive hate read, which this definitely wasn't. This series is an epic fantasy of the sword and shield variety. There is magic, but it's not a very big focus in this book, or this series, sorry. This series is overall pretty low magic. For me, it felt like John Gwynne wanted to include magic in this series, but kind of backpedaled on it towards the middle, and then towards the end thought, crap, I should somehow use the magic since some of my characters can use it. And so it ends up cramming it in towards the end. The lore and stuff behind the magic was super interesting and cool, so it declining in importance for me was pretty unfortunate. I think this series would also make an absolutely fantastic TV show. After the first book and a bit of the second, the pace of the action becomes absolutely breakneck. Due to the volume of POVs, after an action sequence ends for one character, we pretty much get thrown right into another POV and therefore another action sequence. So if you enjoy the action aspect of fantasy books, then I think you'll really enjoy the series, as long as you can stick it out past the first book. So first of all, in my discussion of characters, I will start on the negatives, but worry not, I think the positives do outweigh the negatives. The characters in this series on an emotional level are pretty basic. A lot of their gut reactions to various events that occur are predictable, and for me, not that interesting. In addition, like the campfire time dialogue between the different characters is very dull. It's pretty much the opposite of how someone like Joe Abercrombie does things in his books. Instead of ending a conversation with a good line or changing topic to continue the conversation and make the characters feel more alive or let us learn more, they just let out a grunt. It's always the bloody grunts. Now that I've made my peace, let me get on to the good bits. There are a lot of characters in this series. I've not counted how many POVs there are exactly, but there is a minimum of 15. These POVs comprise of both heroes and villains, who are humans and giants, although not respectively. It starts pretty innocent as a coming-of-age story where the leaders and friends of said leaders train their bodies and own their skills, figure out where they themselves lie on the moral compass. Later on in further books, this constant POV switching means it's like reading a chess game where you see the white pieces move and then the black, and rinse and repeat until for each skirmish we reach checkmate. The major characters in this series have absolutely incredible story arcs. Some of the best I have read so far in my reading journey, so that's pretty good praise there. The revenge arcs in this book are actually, just so good. It's really hard not to say more about it and spoil it, but I will leave that to you if you choose to pick this series up. But I do promise the story arcs, the character arcs in this book are incredible, and the revenge stories are insane. And those were some of my favorite parts of the characters. A pretty major feature of this series is the animal companions. This series does a great job with animal companions, and there is a pretty good spread of them too. So if you like animals in books, that's good news for you. Apart from the major named companions, which I'll talk about in a sec, there are giants that ride like drags, and the drags are kind of like giant, smelly dragon lizard things. There is also a separate clan of giants that ride bears, and they even equip them with armor. I thought that was super, super cool. And getting descriptions of how close they are, the giants and bears that is, and how loyal the bears end up being was super cool too, and I enjoyed that aspect. We also have a wolven, which is John Gwynne's word for big scary wolf thing, who is loyal to the bone, and their name is Storm. Corbin and Storm end up being pretty close and pretty much like part of a pack. Storm is pretty feral, and she has a lot of her own action sequences where she kind of saves the day. And these scenes are very snappy, primitive, and exciting. She gets to take on some of the bigger beasts and is, for the most part, stronger than human beings in this story. Being an animal, she also has her own little tender moments with Corbin and his friends that are very wholesome. And I like a little bit of wholesomeness in my stories, so that was good for me and I enjoyed that. We also have a talking crow called Kraff, which I think was the best animal companion in the book. Kraff starts off with Abrina, who's like the town healer and part witch person. We get a general vibe for their relationship, but as Kraff flies to so many other people to send messages between them, he ends up having different kinds of like friendships with different people. Kraff is pretty loyal and also a flying trash can, just eating whatever scraps he's given or can get his hands on. Kraff starts off kind of grating and a bit. Their talk is pretty primitive, but over the course of the series, displays a good sense of urgency, even humor, and he's just all around a good guy. Yeah, big up Kraft. The world building in this series is pretty good, but it definitely could have been a little bit better. This series is not the Bible of world building. I don't think it strives to be, but it does a pretty solid job. We get a good sense of the layout for this world, with our characters traveling all over the world so frequently. We get character POVs from pretty much all of the countries. I would have liked to see the cultures of these different countries expanded on and fleshed out, as they all feel pretty much the same. So, like, what I mean by that is, for example, everyone has a childhood, right? And depending on where they grow up, they would have eaten different things or had different experiences. And these things shape the people that they become and what they enjoy, like that kind of thing. The only the only human culture in this series that feels any different to the rest is the Vinthalun, and that's because they have more of a Viking theming. In the middle of the nations lies Fawn Forest, a dangerous stretch of woodland home to marshes, wolves, brigands, Vikings, bears, pretty much anything scary that you could encounter in a forest. It's there. In addition to this dangerous forest is a legendary city of myth, Drasil, where the prophesized final battle is due to occur. That takes on a bit of like Viking mythos there. John Gwynne builds his world through prophecy, character travel, which paints the surroundings and environment, as well as fleshing out the backstories of whole cultures. Take the Giants, for example. They are a major separate race to humans in the series. They used to be one united people, but after certain events take place, they shatter and become many different cultures, with different relationships, feuds amongst one another, as well as ways of living. It was always interesting for me to see how one giant interacts with another upon first encounter, when they hear what clan they're from, as you could never tell whether they would be friendly or like just hurl insults at one another. Considering this book is low magic, you have to give John Gwynne at least an A for effort. Despite the low relevance of his low magic, he did put in some time to come up with his own language for the magic. That language felt like Gaelic or Celtic inspired, though I'm not 100% sure. Out of all the world building attempts in this series, I feel the best work was done with the Giants. I enjoyed their characters a lot, and they were such a powerful force and have a pretty good amount of depth to them. The action in this series is absolutely phenomenal. Most of the action scenes are fluid sword and shield battles where characters are thrown into a chaotic battlefield and battle one another. They are incredibly vivid and easy to follow. So you get to read about and picture all the gore that is present on a battlefield. So some of the best fight scenes in the series occur when it's one major character versus another. Um, and especially when they are known to be incredible swordsmen. The action scenes we get during these intense confrontations are well thought out, snappy, and gruesome, but we also get some internal monologue probing the characters meanwhile. There are also some overpowered strategies that get used by major factions, and our good guys evolve their combat over time. For example, more dastardly weapons are invented and stratagems included within like ambushes and things like that, which leads to some even more gruesome scenes. Action is a very large focal point within this series. Every few chapters there is a battle scene, ramping up a lot towards the end. You can tell that John Gwynne really thought the battles through and tried as hard as possible to make them really exciting. Aside from the straight up battles, there is also a lot of action that happens as a result of major events, where characters are forced into certain situations. Those parts are also very adrenaline filled with some pretty major stakes. So, pretty great. This series has very little humor. There is one joke that was funny. Like, it was funny, like, maybe once or twice, but it gets absolutely rinsed. Like, John Gwynne came up with it and thought it was the magnum opus of jokes. A joke so funny that no other jokes are necessary. And unfortunately, it getting repeated so often just absolutely killed it, and his one attempt at humor ended up kind of flopping after a while. So that was rather unfortunate. I would have liked to see just a bit more humor in the kind of more chill campfire type moments when there's no big battles going on or they're not doing something crazy, not trying to pull off some crazy scheme. Just a bit of humor would have been nice, but it's fine, I guess. Overall, I enjoyed the series. The general story was kind of predictable on a macro scale, but there were a lot of twists and turns that weren't as easy to predict that kept things fresh and exciting books 2 through 4. The characters, while plain and do struggle to make jokes, do have some extremely compelling storylines that are high stakes and adrenaline filled. It wasn't completely novel, but either way for me personally, it was quite refreshing to get character POVs from both the heroes and the villains of the story. We got to see how all of the villains got through life and got to power and what they made of the power and how they tried to hold on to it. And oh, how fun it was to hate on them all the way through the story. John Gwynne made some solid attempts at world building by fleshing out a vast continent with varied terrain, creating a language for his underutilized magic system, and writing multiple races such as humans, giants, wolven, bears, drakes. The giants were very well done and one of the best aspects of this series for me. But I feel like the cultures and attitudes of soldiers from all these different countries could have been fleshed out a bit more. In addition, I feel like considering the drakes were such an ominous presence throughout the story that they could have had a little bit more spotlight. The main aspect of this story that should draw fans to this series is action. John Gwynne does a great job of making the action clear and easy to follow, snappy, exciting, and gory. After the slow pace of the first book, the series ramps up and has a breakneck pace with the action that keeps it exciting to read, as long as you don't get burnt out on it. The pace of the action I'd maybe compared to something like Red Rising, for example. So, to conclude, my conclusion, It's a good series with a lot of things to enjoy, but also a lot that it could improve on. Overall, I think for me, it was 3.5 stars. Thank you so much for watching my video. You're a real one for getting this far. I hope it was informative on whether this series is for you, or you just enjoyed my discussion if you've read the series yourself. This is my first full series review. These videos will come every once in a while when I do manage to wrap up a whole series. That does take a while for fantasy, so they won't be that frequent. Please be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd love to hear what you're currently reading, so please take a moment to write that down in the comments below. I will take the time to reply. Anyway, until next time, Rue out.